Hi, botpreneurs. Thanks for watching again to a Facebook broadcast. Today it's a special one because we have guests from two companies. Ramtin Matin works as the Lead Technical Strategist at SpareBank. Hi, Ramtin.
Hi, Baron.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, sure. So you guys are the fourth largest lending bank in Norway and part of the Sparebank1 Group, which is in total the second largest financial group. And
that's correct.
On the other camera we have Henry, also from Norway. Hi, Henry. Henry Vaage Iversen is the CCO and Co-Founder of Boost.ai, a Norwegian conversational platform and basically agency and educational institution in one. Awesome. So we're gonna talk about the journey you guys went through together basically, and then talk about conversational AI within the banking scene. Ramtin, so I was wondering, when did SpareBank first realize that conversational was the way to go, especially for customer support? And what was the first use case you guys defined, and how did that go?
Well, we first figured out that chat or conversational AI was the way to go when we devised our chat first strategy, and the strategy basically focused on accessibility and speed for the customer in order to get their problem solved. And I believe it was the late 2016 that we chose to go into that direction. So we looked at the problem from two different sides. We had the internal view in order of being the most effective as we could, but also from a customer perspective, trying to solve their problems as effectively as possible.
Yeah. So instead of letting them search for many minutes on the website and FAQs, offer them a more dynamic solution.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So Henry, when and how did Boost.ai got involved in this conversational adventure?
So it's actually a really interesting story, because we started a company for like 3.5 years ago in 2016. And we were given basically a challenge by SpareBank. They want to have the best conversational AI driven virtual agent on the market. And there was already some benchmark in the Nordics. We had a couple of banks doing some projects. And of course, that was the benchmark for us. So when we started the company, we didn't have any of the algorithms we have today to be able to understand the intents and so on. So we actually built everything in, I think it's 2 months. And then we actually hit the benchmark in the market. And after 3 months, we're actually surpassing that a lot. So that means that like 4 or 5 months later, we actually got the first contract, and that was with SpareBank. And we went live with, I think it was 500 intents in January in 2017. And from there, we have basically continued building the module we have in banking, for example. So we started with 500 intents. Now that accounts for around 2,500 intents. So that everything started with SpareBank and their need. And of course, as you work with banks, you learn how they structure information. You understand how you can work with them in order, of course, to also take to the next step, which is authentication, and also having the virtual agent being able to handle actions on behalf of the customer. That's something also SpareBank is doing today.
Cool. So you build templates. You say that can be a starting point for several of your customers, and then they can customize on that. That's correct.
Yeah, so typical in a model, you have 3 layers of knowledge. So one is, of course, the generalized knowledge. So being able to understand like, hey, thank you, and kind of those things. The next layer is the industry specific. So in this case, would be banking. So we understand the banking terms. So it's always on specific banking terms. which are not usual covered by the big tech vendors. So we specialize in understanding that in the Nordic, but also in the European context. And the third layer is the company specific. So typical, a bank will have their own offering and their own unique products, which you need also to understand. So kind of there's 3 layers you need to be able to understand. And we have out of the box the 2 top layers. And then, of course, we need to add the company specific.
Cool. Yeah, so Ramtin, we spoke before briefly, and you said that your virtual assistant is now the only entry point for customers to contact the bank. That's quite radical, I have to say. Most companies choose to offer the other channels also out there. I was just wondering, did clients complain a lot, maybe especially in the beginning, and what percentage of conversations do you now see being handed over by the bot to a human agent?
Just a quick elaboration on that. We have chosen the chat channel as the preferred way to communicate with our customers, and as per that decision, that we have removed all the phone numbers and stuff like that from our websites. But we have not shut down the phone lines, so to speak. So people are still able to contact us via phone. But when it comes to the chat, we try to push that channel forward, because we see that it is an effective way, it is an effective means of solving the customer client problem. And we actually also see that 25% of our clients or customers actually escalate the conversation to a human agent, and 75% actually choose to keep the conversation within the conversational AI or a virtual assistant, which is a quite high number, and we actually use that as a guiding KPI in order to measure our own quality and to see how relevant we are and able to actually solve the customer problem. Building on that theory that if we were not able to solve the customer problem, a larger amount of people would actually choose to escalate the conversation to the human agent.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering, already the huge amount of intent was mentioned that this is usually needed at banks or other big corporates. What are the problems and challenges you run into there? How did you structure them and use entities in combination, of course?
So we are actually currently in a project where we are integrating our CRM system, and that is in order to be able to give our customers who actually use this service a more personalized dialogue. We have the capabilities to have a very personalized dialogue based on what type of products they have, what type of interest they have shown towards products, but also from their financial situation, understanding what their net worth is, and actually be able to guide them with good financial advice in that regard. So we are always looking into integrating more and more systems into the conversational AI in order to be as relevant as possible, because in the end, people would like to have specific advice to their situation and not just some type of general response which might not be that relevant.
And I can also add something on the complexity of the model. Of course, as you add thousands of intents, you add the complexity, and we have structured the intent in a hierarchy. So the meaning that we have a really nice visual look on the intents, but also make the use or the need of utterances at a low point, because we can actually, since it's divided in a hierarchy, we can actually be able to add more and more specific intent as we go forward. So typical, we start with the root intent, which could be, for example, insurance. Next could be car insurance, and then we talk about price car insurance, and so on. So you go deeper and deeper in the intent hierarchy. So typical what we need for each of the intents is around 10 utterances or training data samples. So that's basically what the model learns from.
Cool. And so depending on where the bot ends in the hierarchy, the follow-up questions are also, of course, triggered by the steps below. Like, what would you like to know about your car insurance? Yeah, I'm interested in pricing if it wasn't clear.
Yeah, but that's part of the intent classification. So when you classify the intent, you can end up in different part of the path, basically. You go deeper and deeper. But of course, when you want to do entity extraction, as Ramtin said, connect with the backend, of course, you need to be able to extract entities. And of course, if you're missing some of the entities, you need to be able to handle the conversation so you can be able to extract them from the customer. It's not always they're giving all the information you need in the first sentence. Sometimes you need to extract that in the later part of the conversation. So it depends a little bit on basically if it's connected to the backend or not. That will of course determine a lot on the structure of the conversation.
Yeah. And you also keep in mind previous conversations customer already had with the bot.
That is definitely something that we are aspiring to do. We obviously do store the conversations, and we follow the GDPR rules, of course. Mm-hmm. But we would like to use this information actively within the conversation. So we're also looking into saying, all right, the last time you spoke with us, we were speaking about, did you actually get this resolved? To make sure that that the customer actually understands that there's a collective memory across the different channels that we work in within the bank. So regardless of you contacting us via the human agent or the chat or the email, that you actually have a collective memory across these channels. That is something that we're trying to a picture that we're trying to obtain. But of course, there's some issues in terms of some legacy systems that we need to take into account. But the conversational AI are fully capable of actually handling this. So we see that there's a big strength in doing that.
Okay, cool. I see quite some viewers at the moment. So please just let us know if you have any questions. Then we're going to try to tackle them right away. And because that's the fun part about doing a Facebook Live interview, of course.
Of course.
And how does within Boost.ai labeling and annotation work? What tools do you provide there?
So meaning regarding to
label utterances.
So sure. So typical in the solution, of course, there's so much pre-trained that you don't need to label that much data. But we also have some built-in tools where you can actually generate a lot of the utterances you need. So, for example, what we see is that for some of the products, you have almost the same question attached to it. So, for example, for a bank, you can have different insurances, and then of course. Price for insurance X, terms for insurance X have the same structure. It's basically that you need to replace some of the keywords there in order to build the utterances. So that's actually part of the platform that you can actually just add the keywords and then you add the training data. And that's basically taking like 2 seconds adding that training data. And then you have something which are working. And that's really convenient when you want to start adding a lot of intents. So typical, we have experienced a couple of clients wanting to add maybe 10, 20 new products. Then it's really nice that you can actually utilize the training data across these products.
Yeah. And you guys built a native NLP engine and natural language understanding also, and also an intent trainer, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so they are intent trainer. We actually call it AI trainer. So typical, the AI trainer would be able to train the model. So in our solution, we can build a model without having that technical background. You don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need that technical background. So that's the reason, for example, for SpareBank, we train the resources on customer service center to be the role as AI trainer. Because what we have experienced is that they have a lot of insight and understanding on how to communicate with the customer, and they also work daily with the customer. So we definitely see it makes a lot of sense to build the interface for them, so they can train their own virtual agent without being having that technical background. So we call it the AI trainer, and we actually had an AI trainer convention now in Stavanger for a couple of months ago, where we have over 200 AI trainers certified coming in. I think we have over 2,000 AI trainers certified in the platform. So of course they have their own community, and they of course get help from the AI to build intents. So they are going into more like an approver role. They approve. So the AI will give suggestion, here's something you need to learn. Do you approve it? Yes or no? So that is the key role for the AI trainer, in addition to add a good response to the question or the intent.
Okay. Just a comment to what Henry is saying there, if I may. Sure. I think it's very important to stress the fact that although it is called an AI trainer, there's not needed to have technical competency to actually fulfill that role. And I think it's worth mentioning that we need to point that out, because as Henry mentioned as well, the greatest effect that we have had was the resources we actually recruited from our customer center, mainly because they know how our customers actually ask questions, but also because they have understanding of the quite complex product mix of a bank or any other company. You need to have a good understanding of what type of product mix you have, what type of attributes those products has as well, in order to set up an efficient dialogue where you actually want to answer the question of the client as efficiently and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and of course the agents know the lingo also the best that
exactly
customers use, and it might also differ looking at the age of the customer. But I got a question coming in for Henry about the AI trainer. Is it built as a custom interface, or is it something that's integrated in your bot platform?
What do you mean by so what the AI trainer and the customer will get access to is their own platform. So that means that they get their own interface where they have all the tools they need to build a virtual agent. So of course we need to certify them. That's also done online through the same platform. So that means that they open up what we call an admin panel, and then give you overview of the activities, the suggestion from the AI, but also the possibility to build the conversation as well, build intent, and also the conversation flow.
Yeah, so I think it's part of your studio, your platform.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And designing a happy path of a conversation is fairly easy, relatively speaking. Of course, there are always the edge cases that where the labor goes for conversational design. What does Boost.ai offer to make it easier to tackle those unhappy paths, to call it?
Yeah.
Your conversations don't derail.
It's a good question, and of course we see a lot of limitation in a lot of deployments today, because most of the chatbots available on the market, like you ask one question, get a response, and then everything is forgotten. You don't have context, you don't have the memory as to go forward, and I think that's kind of it's not a good customer experience. You definitely want to, even if it's a robot, you want to have some context during the conversation. So we have two really important features in that regard. One thing is what we call a goal. So as you mentioned, the happy path is a way to start the conversation, and we also look at more like a process. So if you want to order a card, you want to get a loan, there's actually a path you need to take, and as I said, it could be a happy path. With the goal, we can set that when they have come to this point of the conversation, it's a success, it's a goal. That means that during that conversation, the customer is able to ask questions of the topic, and then of course be guided back to the conversation, and you continue the flow with information you already had from the conversation. So you can basically, as a human will do, you start talking about something, and then you ask about the weather, some small talk, and then you go, of course, back to the conversation. So goal is one important feature. Another important feature is the context action. So with context action, meaning that when we have a conversation, we will typically say that, I don't know, can you elaborate a little bit on this? And if you say those things in a more generalized conversation, it doesn't really go anywhere. So what we do actually with context action is that we reuse the intent we have. For example, I don't know, to be one intent. And then, of course, since we are in the context of ordering insurance or a product, we will give a different response. But it's the same intent, but we give a different response. So, okay, we're talking about car insurance. And in this case, I don't know the differences here. And then you can, of course, elaborate on those differences before you continue the conversation. So I think those things are really important to make a natural conversation, which are able to deviate from the happy path.
Right. Yeah, and I was also wondering, Ramtin, what do you think or consider to be the most valuable components or features of Boost.ai for your bank?
I think there are several. One of them is obviously user experience. Our AI trainers are, what we get feedback from them regularly is the very intuitive GUI user interface of Boost.ai, which gives you a very great overview of how the dialogue actually is shaped, what type of path you have to go through, and it gives a very logical view of which direction or how you actually should structure the conversation, which is important because if you don't have a good GUI, then it gets very, very difficult to work with conversations. There's a lot of text and there's a lot of attributes and details that you need to be aware of. And the second part is, I think, the way that the entire James platform, Boost.ai platform, is actually structured as a headless system, meaning that you can actually use the NLP engine and the intent structure, not needing that to use the front end. So you're actually able to integrate this quite heavily with your backend systems, which is actually a great strength of the system, because the interesting part, the value creation actually happening is when you actually get your customer data all the way out to the customer themselves, making an end-to-end integration. And that has proven very valuable for us in terms of authentication, because when you're working in a bank, one of the most important commodities that we have is trust, that your money is actually being held in a secure and trustful way. And when we do that, of course, you need to have authentication in place. And that has actually been able to do that when we use the Boost.ai software. So we're actually able to authenticate the user and actually show them, for instance, how much money they have on their accounts, if they want to block their cards, if they have been unfortunate to lose the cards. And we have several other use cases that we're actually trying to build, where we actually integrate end-to-end from our core banking solutions out to the customer dialogue. So that is definitely the most two important strengths that the system has.
Cool. I got a question coming in. It's about the previous topic. So the question is, when you step out of a conversation topic and get back later on, is this something you can turn on and off manually in a conversation? Or is AI taking care of this? In most platforms, I know this is done manually and takes a lot of contemplating whether you turn it on or off. Yeah, I think it's done automatically, if I understood you correctly.
So you need to add it manually, yeah, because I think it's difficult to have it automatically, because you don't really know when the conversation ends or not. So, of course, you can decide on where you want the conversation flow to go at. And I think, of course, adding it automatically will give you some issues, because it could be that you start a conversation and start about different topics, and then like how do you know when the conversation is over, and then you want to go to the next one. So that's definitely added manual.
We've had a lot of discussion about this topic at SpareBank, because obviously we are also interested in knowing when is the conversation actually over. And we have some inferred way of actually trying to figure that out. We built in a feedback loop, so the customer is able to give feedback when the conversation is over. And then you could try to correlate that in terms of timestamps, but that is a difficult work, and we have not been able to do that automatically. So it is definitely a manual process, which we also try to figure out what good way to solve.
Okay, good. And do you then ask that after every conversation, or do you do it at random?
We do it at every conversation, but it's not a mandatory field. So when you're done with the conversation, you get a little pop-up say how would you rate the conversation, and they can give a thumbs up or thumbs down. And if they do that, they can actually go in further and elaborate in a questionnaire how that is how their experience was. But it's not mandatory, so it's not everyone who does it.
No. Okay. Yeah, let's also talk a bit about voice. Henry, do you see any successful voice bots being launched amongst your clients?
There's definitely a lot of interest around voice in general. That's what we meet with most of the clients we work with. Of course, in the Nordics and some of the languages beside English, voice is supported, but it's not always the best quality in that sense. So we've done some proof of concept on voice, but I think, to be honest, I struggle a little bit to find the good use cases. Like return on investment on voice, I think it's difficult to find at this point. I really believe in the voice technology, but I think we are definitely in the early days in many ways. So what we have done so far is using the Amazon Alexa, Google Home, but of course, like for a bank, for example, you need to have authentication. You want to kind of have sensitive data going through those devices. So there's a lot of issues we are now talking to our customer about to see how we can solve them in a good way. I like voice because it's maybe the simplest interface in the world. So like you just talk to a device and then you're able to execute. But of course, in the voice setting, things are a little bit different than in text. In a text format, you can give links and things like that, but that doesn't really make sense in a voice setting. So in voice, I think in order to really have a good experience, you need to have authentication, and you also need the way to actually have the voice handle actions on your behalf. So I think just asking for the weather, maybe it's fun for a while, but I think the real strength is when you start connecting kind of the voice device with it could be a robot vacuum cleaner, stuff at home. I see Sonos actually available now on the voice device. So, and of course, connecting to your bank is definitely interesting, but I think still the market is looking at finding good use cases.
Yeah, and of course you need a kind of private setting if you want to ask on voice what your balance is on your current account.
Yeah, we actually did a proof of concept on that, and exactly as Henry mentioned, I think the market adoption of this type of the voice technology in general is quite low, at least in the banking industry. I know a lot of the vendors or banks actually have this technology in-house, but as you said yourself, it's your financials is a private matter, and you don't sit on the bus and actually just talk out in the open about transferring money or what your balance is and stuff like that. But we actually do see some people on the platform, but I think it's more on a test and fun basis.
Okay, cool. And you also have an app for Android and iOS, of course. I was wondering if the bot and the app work together, or sometimes users have to maybe finish some transactions within the app, and the bot can prepare that and offer a deep link, or is that not the case?
So you mean like on the omni-channel experience?
Yeah.
So of course we can support all interfaces like apps or the mobile bank. Of course, for bank, a lot of people use their mobile. So our technology is available there, and of course giving links so you are able to navigate to the right area you need. I think we're still a little bit work in progress on the omni-channel, that you can actually start one place and continue conversation in another channel. But that's something we are working on now. And I think also, Ramtin, you are also doing some investigation on that field.
Yeah. Yes, we definitely are. As I mentioned earlier, having a multi-channel, omni-channel perspective, we're exploring this from a collective memory perspective. So our conversational AI actually knows when you have been in contact in different channels with the bank. But I said it adds some complexity actually getting all these systems to speak to each other in a real-time setting, because the keyword here is real-time. It doesn't help if your data is even a couple of hours old, because maybe the customer actually got in touch with us in that time. So you need to get the real-time aspect integrated in a good way.
Yeah. And are you guys also contemplating or doing it already, replacing web forms with a bot conversational experience?
Definitely. Actually, it's funny you mentioned it. We just launched a new web form yesterday, trying to replace some of our the web forms where you order insurance. So rather than actually doing it in a web form, you do it through the conversational AI, which has actually proven quite useful, because the web forms it's a relic of the 90s, so to speak. So it's nice to actually have a substitute or alternative to be able to do that. So it works quite nicely so far, and we're following to see what type of usage that type of forms actually get. But we are actually seeing some activity on that already.
Cool. And I was also wondering, do you take, when looking at the conversations, into account what the age is of a customer, or is that maybe something for the coming years where you tailor your conversation? When really the elder people contact the bot, you might use different lingo. Is that...
Yeah, definitely. We actually there's a savings product in Norway where you're able to save money to buy your first house, which gives you quite good interest, and you can get that up until you are 34. But after that, you need to convert that product into something else. And that is a very good example of how we actually target people over or below 34 years old. Obviously, we don't change the lingo so much, but we do target the conversation directly towards the options that they have if they're over 34, or if they're under 34 and don't have this savings product, then we actually try to push it out, because it's a product where you get subsidized from the Norwegian state. So you get a quite good interest rate and tax deduction on that. So definitely having a targeted conversation based on age is obviously something that brings added relevance and value to the customer experience.
Right. And are the conversations produced in a centralized space, so the tone of voice is always guaranteed? How did you set it up?
Yeah, so it has been a transition. In the beginning, we tried to have a more of a young and hip lingo, using a lot of smileys and stuff like that. But we have transitioned to go away from that, trying to be a bit more professional, but not very boring. because we saw that we get some different responses. We don't want to put in too much of an emotional conversation with the customer, and emojis per definition bring a lot of emotion into a conversation. So we thought that being neutral is something that benefits everyone in the long run. But obviously here with the holidays coming up, we do added a bit of a Christmas trees and stuff like that just to spice it up a bit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can add a little bit of humor maybe, although that's very delicate, of course.
Yes, definitely.
And I think we're touching into a really interesting topic, because like when we started 3 years ago, we see that the trend at that time was to have it as a persona, like we need to be like a human, because like we want the robot to be humanized in some ways. And I think that's what was part of the research they did then, was that, okay, customer want the robot to be human, but still they want to be us to be transparent. It's actually a robot. It's kind of taking the best of two worlds. But what we're seeing now as a trend is, of course, that do the customer really care? The things they care about is solving their problem. Mm-hmm. So even if it's a human-like or if it's a robot, doesn't really matter. The most important thing is, of course, it's able to understand you. That's the key thing. Mm-hmm. And how it looks like is not that important. So that's something, of course, which is a key part of all projects we do, is to define the tone of voice in the early projects to make sure that we are in line with the company's profile. And I think some of the banks are probably a bit more conservative than other companies within telco, where they have like a more younger group of customers. But that's definitely a really interesting topic and something we discuss a lot now with our clients.
Okay, cool. Ramtin, welcome back.
Thank you. There was a brief outage.
Yeah, no problem. But I think it's important to always, via the avatar, let me put it this way, that the customer should know it's not a human, right? Otherwise they expect human powers and more from, maybe too much from the bot.
And that is a very, very good point, establishing expectations from an early point, because we do see cases where people think that you're speaking with a human being and they expect things that the technology cannot deliver at this point. And that is also why we have chosen a robot. A lot of people go for a female or a male persona, which kind of misleads or misguides the customer in a direction which is not that good of an idea. That's why we have chosen a robot and a robot name as well, to make sure that people understand that this is not actually a human being.
Yeah, because even if you mention it via text in the introduction, people read over it quite often.
Yeah.
And they just start typing their question. And sentiment analysis, that's of course something you both are also interested in. When somebody says, I tried already 3 times to transfer money and didn't succeed, they don't want to get to know how they have to do it because they already tried it, obviously. How is that best being tackled?
So sentiment is definitely really interesting, and how we mainly use sentiment today is to detect negative mood. So what that means is that when we detect that the customer is a little bit angry, frustrated, we actually give them the possibility to talk to a human, because I think the human can do a better job of kind of comfort them. But sentiment is also with the entrance of the emojis, makes it a little bit more difficult to understand sentiment, because like sentiment is like in the written language now, I can write something to Ramtin which is quite bad, but then I just add a smiley face and everything is good. So, and I think some of the issue with the emoji as well is that people are using them different. So people are not using the emoji in the same way, which is also making it a bit confusing from the AI side. So so sentiment is something you definitely want to use as part of the conversation, but you be careful by relying too much on the sentiment, but it could give you some wrong indications. That's our experience, at least.
Yeah, so we have also done some research in this place, and what we think or believe is a good balance is using sentiment to know when you want to escalate the conversation to a human agent.
Yes.
So in your own example, as you mentioned, I've tried to transfer money 3 times, but it still doesn't work. That is a situation where you don't want a conversational AI or virtual assistant to take over the conversation, because there might be a chance that it doesn't actually solve the problem. But if you sense that the sentiment is quite negative or frustrated, you immediately send over to a human agent to be sure that the customer actually gets their problem solved. So that is at least the use cases that we have been discussing to how we could actually approach that.
Yeah. And when transferring that chat, the avatar of the bot could change, of course, in a picture of a real human being to make it really clear.
Yeah, both the name of the bot and the name of the human agent suddenly appears, and you're able to see that you have a human being in the other end. Yeah.
Cool. And I got a request coming in. What is your best bot in the English language, and which one is best in Norwegian? So the viewers would like to try something, if that's possible. Maybe Henry can share a link or two later on in the comments below the Facebook video.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Because Ramtin, your bot is of course primarily Norwegian, but understands a little bit English. Is that correct?
That's true. So it's obviously in production and live on SpareBank.no. So that's always possible to go there and see that.
Yeah. Henry, maybe you can share a bit of the product roadmap you guys have for the year 2020.
Yeah, so first of all, there's always a lot of enterprise stuff for me to cover. We have already covered a lot of enterprise stuff, but the list is usually never ending. When you start integrating with a lot of the backend system, integrating as a part of a big ecosystem, you need to have a lot of enterprise stuff in place. But like on the AI side, which is kind of even more interesting, is that we I think in most technologies today, it's a lot of work to build good conversations. It's also work to go through the logs, to add new intents and everything. So what we are doing now is taking the AI trainer role and basically automate some of the work they are doing today. So typical giving suggestion on new intents they need to cover. Maybe they need to add some new synonyms. We want the AI trainer to be more like a approver role. So having the dashboard with all the activity, all the traffic, and then of course the AI trainer needs to approve in the end. But still, that the AI is doing the heavy lifting, because that should be the work of the AI. So based on the core technology we have, we are able to extract a lot of the intent from the chat logs, and also give suggestion on improvements. And I think also another dimension which is in key here is being able to enhance the conversation. So do A/B testing on the conversation. For example, if you have order a product as a conversation, you want to make sure that how do we optimize that conversation flow in the best possible way by testing different questions during that conversation. So in a broader sense, have the machine being able to generate more of the text and the responses itself, I think is a key part of our roadmap going forward.
Okay, sounds good. And is your software also going to be installed on premises, or will it be cloud-based?
No, so the default setup is the Amazon Web Services, but we also support on-prem. So we also do that for some clients.
Yeah, of course. The demand for that, especially in Europe, probably big.
Yeah, but we see definitely there's a lot of maturity around the cloud, especially in some like in the Nordics. Cloud is usually no problem. We also see the same patterns in Europe now, that the cloud is getting more mature, and that of course makes it a bit easier to set up the project. On-prem have a higher cost and will of course also take more resources than doing things in the cloud. But we have the possibility to extract chat logs and sensitive data at regular level, meaning that we kind of have a hybrid solution of on-prem and cloud.
Okay, so via data masking, businesses are still able to use the cloud within a secure way.
Yeah, so we can mask the data, anonymize the data, and then we can, of course, let the customer extract the data, so they have that data in their own data center if they want.
Yeah, right. And Ramtin, can you share a little bit more about your product roadmap? You already gave some hints, but maybe to summarize a bit.
So we definitely gonna continue on our chat-first strategy. We have a goal of increasing the volumes of which is currently being handled. Currently, we have 34% of all communications to the entire banking group being handled by our conversational AI. We'd like to increase that to 50% during 2020. And the way that we want to do that is basically expanding the utility functionality, meaning that the end-to-end integrations will be more abundant. We will have a broader scenario of things that the customer is able to do within the conversational AI. So that is, we're going to use that as a how to say it, to push volumes through that channel. And then we have some nice projects on the compliance and regulatory side. We are hoping to aim to get the first authorized conversational AI, meaning that it has been authorized by the Norwegian financial authorities to practice as a authorized advisor. That is a quite a groundbreaking use case, because suddenly we can guide the customer to a much larger extent than we are able to do today. We're not able to give financial advice because that is not allowed unless you're an authorized advisor. So that is something that we hope to do in the first half year of 2020. And obviously also emphasizing on the quality of the conversation by introducing further integrations to our CRM systems and our product systems to have a more specific and relevant conversation with our clients. So that is the main three areas that we will be focusing on the next coming year.
Okay, great. What's your vision? Question for both of you on the future of conversational AI for the. Let's not look further than 2 years, but what trends do you see?
Well, we see that this technology has capabilities to. If we try to look a bit further, like you said, 2 years ahead, this technology has the ability to become a very large channel. Within 2 years, as I mentioned, we have already taken over 34% of the of all communications going into the banking group, which is quite a lot. So we have some interesting use cases in place where we see, but could we actually be able to replace our entire website with conversational AI? Because if you tend to look at it, the way that websites are produced today are exactly the same way that has been produced since the 80s and 90s. It's basically a poster with information which the customer needs to navigate. But what if you had like a one-stop shop for the customer, being able to say, all right, I want to down pay my mortgage, or I want to transfer money, and being able to do that from basically a conversational AI or a virtual assistant that actually does that seamlessly for you, without being able to navigate heavy websites. That is an interesting vision to have, and something that we are playing around a bit with to see if we can actually be able to do that within the next 2 years. But it would require our maturity in the market as well. We don't do stuff unless we see that it has a benefit and it actually solves one of the customer problems that you might have. So a big part of it is growing together with your customers and actually see whether they actually see the benefits of going in this direction as well.
Okay, great. And for you, Henry?
I can also build on top of what Ramtin is saying, and what I think is really the potential of this technology is just make it just more convenient and easier for us customers. I think for bank, for example, being able to handle communication with the bank, a little bit like the good old days where you have the one-to-one relationship, but now, of course, at a much greater scale, I think will be the key going forward. I don't think in the future people will be like, hey, I'm being waiting 30 minutes to get help. That's not acceptable. And also looking at conversational AI, not only as a chat window, but more like an engine which can be run through different interfaces. So, and as I said, build on what Ramtin said about the homepage, just maybe flipping around a little bit. Now, most homepages are really static. So we want to make sure that we can build a conversational AI interface, and of course, having more dynamic approach to it. So I think just being present in people's life, being relevant, and being able to find information much simpler. Because what we have learned, especially working with the public sector, is a little bit interesting to see a lot of the public agencies are, of course, their purpose is to serve people, and sometimes it's really, really difficult to find information. So I think in today's world, the problem is not a lack of information, it's probably too much information. And of course, Google made the whole world available by information. But I think now with the conversational AI, you can, of course, cater and make the information a bit more relevant for people. So it's easier to find what you need when you need it. And that's kind of my vision for conversational AI, just make it simpler. And of course, being able to execute and find information for you when you need it.
Yeah. And so conversational AI will be slowly eating from websites and app functionality, probably. Okay, cool, guys. That concludes, I think, this session, unless you have some last-minute stuff to add. But I would really like to thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge. Let's keep in touch, and good luck with all the upcoming projects. Okay.
Great. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.